I stood outside the glass doors of a 5-star hotel I built with my own hands, watching my sister plant herself in the entrance like I was a stranger begging to get in. She laughed loud enough for the valet to hear and said I couldn't afford to step inside. Then my mom leaned in close, her perfume sharp as a warning, and whispered that I shouldn't embarrass the family tonight. In that moment, it didn't just sting, it split something old open, because 10 years ago they told me I'd never be more than service staff, and somehow they still believed it. They had no idea I owned the entire building, every suite, every chandelier, every fork on every table. I could have walked away and let them keep their story. But the door swung again, and my security chief headed straight toward us. And that's when I realized something ugly and true. Family blindness costs dearly. My name is Blaze Kincaid. I'm not telling you this to look powerful. I'm telling you because it hurt, and because I know I'm not the only one who's been dismissed by the people who were supposed to see me. Before I share the rest, I'd love to know you're here with me. Comment hi or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes knowing someone is listening makes it easier to finally say the hard parts out loud. Thank you. And if you can please subscribe, not for algorithms, but because stories like mine get buried when they're told quietly. Your support helps me keep speaking, especially after a night like that. And now, let me tell you everything. When my mom texted me that morning, it wasn't long or dramatic, just the kind of message that pretends to be practical while it cuts. Don't come to your father's birthday. It's at the Opaline. You can't afford it. Don't embarrass the family. I stared at the screen until the words stopped looking like English and started looking like a verdict. I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have a response, but because I knew the script. If I argued, I'd be making it about me. If I begged, I'd be proving her point. If I stayed silent, she'd tell everyone I was ashamed. There was no winning inside the story she liked to tell about me. So I just put my phone face down on my desk and let the quiet sit there like a weight. Outside my window, Brickell was already awake in that polished, expensive way. Glass towers catching the sun, people in crisp clothes moving fast with coffee in hand, the kind of morning that smells like ambition and air conditioning. Down below, the Opaline Tower rose the way it always did, clean lines, pale stone-tinted glass, and a presence that didn't have to announce itself. The Opaline Miami took up the heart of it, luxury suites stacked like secrets, a sky lounge that always felt one breath away from the clouds, fine dining tucked behind doors heavy enough to make you lower your voice without being asked. The floors above held office space that companies fought over, the floors below held restaurants and retail that moved money all day long. The top belonged to me, not as a fantasy, but as paperwork signatures, and years I don't talk about at family gatherings. I walked through the lobby like I always did, not as a guest, not as someone trying to look important, just as someone checking his house before the day got loud. The scent diffuser was on the right blend, clean citrus with something warm underneath. The marble underfoot was cool and seamless, the kind of stone you only notice when it's wrong. The light through the atrium skylight hit the chandeliers at an angle that made the crystals flash like small, controlled lightning. Staff stood the way we trained them to stand, present without hovering, attentive without fear. I could tell who was new by how they held their shoulders and who had been here long enough to understand that hospitality isn't servitude, it's standards. I've always found it bitterly funny that my father used to spit the word service like it meant beneath, while I've built an entire empire on doing it better than anyone. To my family, I'm still the kid who walked away from the respectable path. The kid who left the safe accounting firm with its beige carpet and cheap coffee and predictable promotions. The kid who chose hotels, restaurants, guest experience, the work they like to romanticize when they're being catered to, and insult when someone chooses it as a life. They never watched me work. They never asked what I was building. They decided what my choices meant and called it truth. 10 years ago, I was sitting at our dining room table, the kind of table that holds a family together until it becomes the place where they break you down. My father's voice had filled the room like he owned the air. He told me no son of his was going to spend a life waiting on people. My mom didn't yell. She didn't have to. She looked at me the way you look at a bill you didn't expect, the way you look at something inconvenient that might ruin the picture. Harper was already smirking because Harper learned early that being the favorite meant joining the crowd, not questioning it. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't plead my case like it was a debate. I just stood up, swallowed whatever was burning in my throat, and left. That was the moment I stopped asking permission to become myself. Back in the present, the first meeting on my calendar had nothing to do with family and everything to do with control. Expansion plans, staffing models, brand integrity, capital allocation. Numbers big enough to make people nervous and details small enough to ruin you if you ignore them. My team moved through slides that would have sounded like science fiction to the version of me my parents still imagine. The Opaline Hospitality Group wasn't a dream anymore. It was a machine. It was 32 countries of relationships and contracts and promises that had to be kept. It was a reputation you don't buy with money, you buy with consistency. I signed off on a major operational expansion without a speech because the truth is, my job is rarely cinematic. It's mostly discipline. But even in that meeting, the day had a private edge. One of the line items was a banking partner review, and I didn't need to scroll far to see Connor's world sitting inside my world like a smaller fish in a larger tank. Connor worked at a bank. He loved to brag about the kind of place that gives mid-level titles to men who need them. Junior VP looks nice on a business card. It sounds like power at a family dinner. In my reports, it was just a line under secondary accounts. His bank was pushing for an increased credit facility, and it was also on our short list for potential acquisition or strategic control depending on how the quarter moved. I didn't make that personal. I couldn't afford to. The irony was that Connor's success was about to be decided by a board he didn't even know I sat on. Another report sat in the folder beneath it, and this one hit closer to the bone. A leasing negotiation inside Opaline Tower. Harper's firm was trying to secure a floor. Not the penthouse, not the executive levels, just a mid-tier space with the right address to impress clients. Their financials were thin. The margin wasn't there. They were trying to punch above their weight because Harper's whole life has been a performance of belonging. And here was the part that almost made me laugh out loud in the middle of a serious meeting. My family's image, the thing they worship, was literally being propped up by my building, my staff, my systems, my risk. By late morning, I had the envelope in my hand. It was simple, no bow, no dramatic reveal. Inside were deed documents for a Santa Barbara coastal property held under one of my Opaline entities. A real asset. A real gift, not a symbolic one. It was the softest weapon I owned because it was both kindness and proof. It said I'm still your son even after everything, but it also said you don't get to pretend you made me. I wasn't going to bring it to buy love. I was going to bring it because I refused to let their cruelty turn me into someone smaller than I am. That's when I opened the internal schedule for the evening and felt the first cold twist of the day. It wasn't labeled Richard Kincaid birthday dinner. It was listed as Skyline level private event. Security flagged, restricted access. VIP elevator scheduling, special instructions. That wasn't just a family dinner. That was a stage, a curated display. A social transaction disguised as celebration. And suddenly my mom's text made a different kind of sense. She wasn't just worried I'd embarrass the family. She was worried I'd ruin the story she planned to sell. I sat back in my chair and let the pieces settle into place. If the night was a performance, then my presence wasn't a problem because of who I was. It was a problem because of what I represented. The truth. And truth doesn't fit neatly into a script built on appearances. I didn't decide to show up as a son walking into a birthday dinner. I decided to show up as the owner walking into his own building through the front doors in full view, because whoever was truly afraid of me being seen had earned that fear. I picked up my phone, saw my mother's message again, and asked myself one question that wouldn't leave me alone. Who exactly was trying so hard to keep me outside, and what were they protecting? By noon, the tower felt like it was holding its breath. Not because we weren't busy, we were always busy, but because I could feel the tension moving through small systems the way a building tells you when something is off. Event staff checked radios twice. Concierge reviewed lists more carefully. The VIP elevator schedule was being treated like a state secret. The kind of energy you get when people think someone important is watching. Someone was. It was me. I called Tasha Nguyen up to the executive office and asked for the Skyline level dossier. Tasha didn't blink the way new employees do when they're nervous. She'd been with Opaline long enough to understand that the calm questions are usually the ones that matter most. She placed the packet in front of me and walked me through the highlights without adding opinion. Guest list, special requests, privacy requirements, seating plan. A note about family-only access to certain corridors. A note about staff being instructed not to discuss the event with unapproved attendees. Even the language was telling. Not non-guests. Not unauthorized personnel. Unapproved attendees. Like my mother was running a velvet rope club inside my own property. I scanned the names and felt the shape of the evening get sharper. Miles Sutter, a law partner whose firm leased space in one of my other buildings and had been circling a bigger deal. Mr. Keating from the bank, someone who'd tried to get on my calendar more times than I could count, always with a quick opportunity and a tone that assumed I owed him access. The Whitmore's old money Miami, the kind of family that doesn't ask for things directly, they just let silence imply entitlement. These weren't random friends coming to sing happy birthday. This was a collection of social leverage. My mother had assembled a room designed to impress itself. I didn't say that out loud. I just closed the file and asked one more question. Any special instructions about the entrance? Tasha hesitated for half a second, then told me the truth. The family requested tighter control at the front doors. They wanted the vibe of exclusivity from the moment guests arrived. They wanted staff to defer to a family point of contact for any situations. I didn't need her to tell me who that point of contact was. I could practically hear Harper's voice, already sharp and smug, treating the lobby like her private runway. From there, I went down to the fine dining kitchen. Chef Elena Marquez was plating test bites with the kind of focus that makes you respect silence. Elena didn't care about my last name. She cared about whether the food told the story it was supposed to tell. She handed me the tasting menu with ink marks already on it, and we walked through it the way we always did, like two people building an experience rather than selling a meal. I suggested one adjustment, a small shift in pacing, not because I wanted control, but because I knew what the night needed. A menu can calm a room or agitate it. It can soften egos or sharpen them. Tonight was going to have enough sharp edges without the food adding more. The staff watched without staring, but I could feel their attention, not because they were curious, but because they cared. I've always believed you earn loyalty in a hotel the way you earn it anywhere else, by showing up when it's inconvenient and treating people like professionals, not props. My father used to think hospitality was about being beneath someone. In this kitchen, it was clear it was about being excellent. That difference matters. In the early afternoon, Marcus Reed met me in a quieter hallway just off the service corridor, the place we use for conversations that can't be overheard. Marcus is built like the kind of man who makes trouble think twice, but he speaks softly because real authority doesn't need volume. He showed me the security plan for the evening and pointed to a section marked with family requests. They asked for us to keep out anyone who isn't on the list, he said, careful with his words. They also asked if a family member could stand near the main entrance to help identify guests. I kept my face neutral. And what did you tell them? I told them we don't outsource access control to private individuals, Marcus said. We can position staff at the entrance, but we don't let guests police the doors. That's why I trust Marcus. He understands the difference between a private event and a private kingdom. I told him I wasn't canceling anything. I wasn't going to punish my father for the stage my mother built. But I gave one clear instruction. Tonight we follow our standards. No one turns the front doors into a gate based on vibes and ego. If there's a situation, I want it documented. Camera timestamps, names, exact language. Everything. Marcus nodded once. Understood. After he left, I went back to my office and opened the operational reports I knew would irritate me. Harper's lease negotiations still shaky, still trying to force an image the numbers didn't support. Diane's resort membership request still sitting in pending, like a quiet reminder that the world doesn't bow just because she thinks it should. Connor's bank file pushing for more credit while pretending strength. I read them all the way. I read any report looking for risk, for patterns, for pressure points. It wasn't revenge. It was reality. My family liked to talk about success like it was a moral trait. My world talks about it like it's leverage. The difference is leverage doesn't care about feelings. Then my legal team forwarded an alert that made the whole day tilt. An email had come into Opaline leadership channels written in a tone that tried to sound casual but smelled like entitlement. It referenced family ties to ownership and suggested a partnership opportunity that would be easier to finalize because of the private event tonight. The signature at the bottom read, Preston Weller. Preston, Harper's fiancé. The man who showed up at holidays with perfect teeth and vague job descriptions and a hunger behind his smile. He had sent an email on company letterhead as if he belonged to the people who owned my world. As if he could borrow my name without ever earning it. And the worst part, the part that made my jaw tighten, was how predictable it was. They were trying to lock me out of the building while using the building to elevate themselves. They were ashamed of the son they thought I was while quietly benefiting from the man I actually became. For a minute I considered shutting it down immediately. One call to Legal, one instruction to blacklist Preston from any internal communications, one update to security that would keep him away from restricted areas. It would have been clean, efficient, satisfying, but I didn't do it. Not yet. Because I wanted to see who would say what when they thought they still controlled the room. I wanted to watch the mask slip in real time. I wanted Harper and my mother to experience what it feels like when the story you've been telling collapses under the weight of the truth. So I filed the email. I saved the metadata. I made sure it could be referenced later without debate. Then I texted Marcus one sentence that would set the night in motion. I'm coming through the front doors tonight like any guest. No private elevator. I want to see who tries to block the entrance and who's behind it. He replied almost immediately. Understood. We'll be ready. By late afternoon, the sun dropped lower over Betrayal, turning the glass outside into a mirror that made the city look like it was watching itself. Somewhere inside my mother's head, she was rehearsing her whispers. Somewhere inside Harper's head, she was rehearsing her laugh. Somewhere inside my father's evening, he was probably just hoping for a good dinner without realizing he was the excuse for a negotiation of status. And here I was holding a simple envelope with a deed in it, standing in the center of the machine I built, choosing the hardest kind of honesty. I wasn't going to storm in as a king, I was going to walk in as myself. And if they tried to stop me, they would do it in front of the very people they were desperate to impress. By late afternoon, Betrayal looked like it had been polished for the evening. The glass buildings caught the sun and threw it back in clean, bright angles. On the street below my office, black SUVs rolled up to curbs like they belonged there. Men in pressed shirts and women in sharp dresses moved with purpose, the kind of purpose that comes from being watched and wanting to look like you deserve it. From where I sat, the city felt calm, but the tower didn't. The Opaline never did when something was about to happen. I stayed in my office longer than I needed to. Not because I was afraid to go downstairs, but because there are moments you can feel coming like weather, and once you step into them, you don't get to pretend you didn't know. The envelope sat on my desk in front of me, plain and unassuming. It held more truth than my family had given me in a decade. I opened an old folder on my laptop, one I hadn't touched in months. Inside was a copy of the email I'd sent the day I left home. I didn't reread every line. I didn't need to. I remembered the tone. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't angry. It was me younger trying to be reasonable with people who mistook control for love. I'd asked for one thing simple enough to fit in a sentence: respect. Not applause, not money, not approval. Just respect for the fact that I was choosing my own life. They never answered that email in any real way. My mom sent a short reply about how I was making a mistake. My father didn't reply at all. Harper made jokes about it at Thanksgiving like it was a story about someone else. After that, I stopped offering explanations. If you have to convince people you're worth basic dignity, you end up shrinking yourself just to keep the peace. I'd done enough of that. Tonight wasn't about revenge. I kept repeating that to myself as I closed the folder. Revenge is loud. It's messy. It wants an audience. What I wanted was quieter and more final. I wanted the humiliation to stop. I wanted the pattern to end. I wanted to walk into a room without being treated like I was begging for a chair that didn't belong to me. I picked up the envelope again and checked the documents one more time, not because I doubted my team, but because I needed to feel the certainty in my hands. The deed for the Santa Barbara property was clean. The legal entity was correct. The signatures were correct. The conditions for transfer were clear. It was real value, not a symbolic gesture. I didn't wrap it in glossy paper or tie it with a ribbon. I didn't want anything about it to look like performance. The real thing doesn't need decoration to be convincing. A soft knock came at my door. Tasha stepped in with her tablet held close. Her expression controlled the way it always was when she didn't want to bring drama into the room. "They're here," she said. I didn't ask who. I already knew. "They arrived early," she added, and I could tell from the way she chose her words that this wasn't routine. They requested that staff not allow anyone inappropriate up to Skyline level. They also asked for a note on the event file. What kind of note, I asked. Tasha hesitated, then answered a restriction. About a man named Blaze. They said he shouldn't be granted access. The words landed in my chest like something heavy and old. It wasn't just that they didn't want me at the dinner. It was the way they tried to turn my own systems into a weapon. They were using the language of exclusivity, the tools of the tower, to erase me. I didn't let my face change. I nodded once. "Thank you," I said. And Tasha left without another word. As soon as the door closed, I called Marcus. He answered on the second ring. I heard he said before I could speak. "Tell me exactly what's happening," I said. "There was an attempt to position a family member at the main entrance," Marcus said. "They wanted to stand near the doors and identify guests themselves. I refused. I placed our staff according to policy. But they're still hovering. They're trying to control the flow. Document everything I said. Names, timestamps, what they say, who they say it to." "I already started," Marcus replied. "And Blaze, I want you to know this doesn't have to get ugly." "I'm not here to make it ugly," I said, and I meant it. "I'm here to stop pretending." After I hung up, I pulled up the reports one last time, like checking the locks on a house before you leave. Harper's lease request still showed incomplete financial qualification. Connor's bank was still in the middle of credit facility review and broader evaluation. My mother's resort membership request still sat in pending polite and indifferent. Preston's email was saved metadata intact, the kind of record that doesn't care how charming someone is in person. All the strings were visible. They just didn't know I was holding them. I finally left my office and took the elevator down, not the private one, not the service one, the same path a guest would use. As the doors opened into the lobby, the noise hit me first. Laughter bouncing off stone, glass clinking. Voices leaning into each other with that false warmth people wear when they want to be seen as belonging. The lobby looked exactly the way I designed it to look at night, soft lighting, controlled music, a quiet sense of money. And inside that calm, my family was building a storm. I didn't step into the center of the lobby. I took a longer route along the edge, watching. I saw Harper's profile first, her hair set perfectly, her body angled like she was already posing. My mother was nearby, not drawing attention, but somehow directing it, leaning in to speak to someone, smiling at the right moments. Connor lingered a few paces behind them, adjusting his jacket, scanning the room like he was checking who mattered. I watched them for a beat longer than I should have. There was something almost surreal about seeing them here in my world, behaving like it was theirs. The Opaline had always been about standards, about control, about making people feel safe without letting them see the mechanics of it. My family walked through those mechanics like they owned the gears. I went back toward the exit instead of deeper into the lobby. It mattered that I did this the way I planned. I wanted the front doors. I wanted the exact moment. I wanted the proof of who they chose to be when they thought they were in charge. Outside, the valet line was longer now, headlights washing the curb in pale beams. I stepped into the drop-off zone as if I'd just arrived, letting the evening air settle on my skin, letting the city noise feel real. I adjusted the cuff of my jacket, not because I was nervous, but because the gesture kept my hands steady. The envelope was in my left hand. The keycard was in my pocket. Everything I needed was already with me. As I walked toward the glass doors, I could see the lobby lights reflecting off them like a mirror. I could also see Harper moving into position before I even reached the threshold. She stepped forward with the confidence of someone who had never been corrected in public. My mother angled herself behind her half a step to the side, close enough to influence but far enough to deny responsibility. I heard my mother's voice before I saw her mouth move. It was a whisper aimed at Harper, sharp and urgent. "Remember," she said. "Don't let him step inside. People are watching." My fingers tightened around the envelope. The keycard pressed against my thigh in my pocket, a quiet reminder of ownership. I took one more step forward, closing the distance between us until there was nothing left to hide behind except their pride. Harper's smile widened as I reached the doors, and it wasn't the kind of smile you give a brother. It was the kind you give someone you want to put in their place. She planted herself directly in front of the entrance, shoulders squared, chin lifted, turning the hotel threshold into a checkpoint. "You can't come in," she said loud enough that the concierge on duty turned his head. "You're not on the list." I looked at her for a second, not because I was stunned, but because I wanted to see how far she was willing to go with an audience. The lobby behind her was full of motion, people drifting toward the private elevator corridor. A couple in expensive clothes pausing near the bar to wait for someone. A man in a suit glancing toward us, then away, then back again, like he couldn't help himself. "On what list?" I asked, keeping my voice level. Harper's eyes flicked over me the way she'd done when we were kids, and she was deciding what insult would land best. "The list for Skyline level," she said. "It's private. It's for family and important guests." "Dad is my family," I said. My mother moved closer, her hand touching Harper's arm, not to stop her but to anchor her. She leaned toward me close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same sharp floral she's worn for years, the scent of someone who believes presentation is protection. "Blaze," she murmured, and her voice was soft, almost caring. Almost. "Don't do this here. There are people. Don't embarrass us." "Embarrass you," I repeated quietly. Harper laughed, a quick burst like she'd been waiting for the line. "You can't afford to be here," she said. "This isn't some cheap place where you can just walk in and act like you belong." The concierge shifted his weight, uncertain. I could tell he wanted to intervene, but didn't know whose authority he was supposed to respect. That hesitation was exactly why I didn't pull the keycard out. Not yet. The whole point was to let their words exist in the air long enough to become something no one could later claim was misheard. I glanced past Harper into the lobby, at the marble floor, the soft lighting, the quiet elegance. Staff moved with practiced calm, but I saw faces turning. I saw curiosity and discomfort. The front doors of a luxury hotel are not a family courtroom. Harper was trying to make them one anyway. "What exactly are you afraid of?" I asked, still calm. Harper's cheeks tightened. "I'm not afraid of anything," she snapped. "I'm protecting Dad's night. He doesn't need this." She flicked her eyes toward me like the word she wanted to use was worse than this. My mother's whisper cut in again, aimed at me now. "You're being dramatic," she said. "You always do this. Just go. We'll tell your father you couldn't make it." I felt something steady in my chest, not anger, not sadness, something colder and cleaner. "You already told him that," I said. My mother's eyes flashed. "Because it's true," she said quickly. "You can't keep up with this world. Harper has built relationships. Connor has a real career. This is their circle. Don't force yourself into it." I almost smiled at the word circle. Their circle sat inside my building like a borrowed suit. Harper turned slightly toward the concierge and lifted her hand like she had the right to command him. "He's not allowed up," she said. "We reserved the whole level. Don't let him through." The concierge's mouth opened, then closed. His eyes darted to the front desk where Tasha stood behind the counter watching. Tasha's expression didn't change, but her gaze held something firm, like she was waiting for the right moment to step in without breaking policy. I let Harper keep talking. Every second she spoke was another second of documentation, another second of her choosing cruelty in public. Camera lenses above us blinked red, recording without emotion. The valet line behind me continued. A couple of guests paused near the curb, pretending not to listen while listening anyway. This was exactly the kind of scene my mother tried to avoid, and she was the one feeding it. "If you truly believe I don't belong inside," I said, "then call security. Follow procedure." Harper's eyes lit with the thrill of what she thought was victory. "Fine," she said. "We will." She reached for her phone. My mother's hand tightened on Harper's arm and she leaned in again, whispering fast. "Don't let him make a scene," she said. "People are watching." "They're watching because you're doing this," I said, and my mother's face tightened as if I'd slapped her. Before Harper could dial, Connor appeared at the edge of the lobby, moving quickly, irritation already on his face, like he'd been dragged away from something he considered important. He stepped through the crowd with that puffed-up confidence he saves for places where he thinks he's above others. "What's going on?" he demanded, eyes narrowing on me. "Blaze, why are you here?" Harper spoke over him. "He's trying to get in," she said. "He's not on the list." Connor's gaze flicked over my clothes, my posture, the envelope in my hand, like he was building an argument out of surface details. "This isn't the time," he said, lowering his voice in a way meant to sound reasonable. "You can't just show up and cause problems. There are important people up there." "Right," I said. "Important." My mother seized the opening Connor gave her. "Connor is right," she said. "Please. Just leave. Don't humiliate your father on his birthday." "Humiliate him," I repeated again, slow. Harper's voice sharpened. "You're acting like a victim," she said. "Nobody invited you. Nobody wants you here." The concierge shifted again, and this time I heard him murmur to another staff member near the door low enough that he thought I wouldn't catch it. "The family said not to allow a man named Blay up to skyline level," he said, sounding uneasy. My stomach didn't drop. It settled. That single sentence confirmed everything. They hadn't just decided at the door to block me. They'd planned it. They'd used the event file, the internal notes, the language of exclusivity to preemptively erase me. I looked at my mother. "So you put my name in the file," I said softly. "You made sure staff was told to keep me out." My mother's eyes widened in a way that tried to look offended. "Don't be ridiculous," she said. "This is about protecting the family." Harper's mouth tightened. "You're not family in this context," she said, and the words were so ugly in their calmness that even Connor flinched. A group of guests walked past us toward the elevator corridor, and one of them, a man in a suit with silver hair, glanced directly at me. His eyes paused, sharpened as if he recognized something. He didn't speak, but his attention lingered longer than politeness required. He looked at my face like he was running it through memory, then looked at Harper blocking the door like she was an inconvenience. That look alone put a crack in my mother's composure. My mother pivoted toward him, instantly smile switching on, voice brightening. "So good to see you," she said, rushing to fill the space with charm. Then, without realizing how close I was, she added in a softer voice meant to shape perception. "I'm sorry about this. He's not always stable. He gets impulsive. We try to keep things calm." The lie was almost elegant. Almost. It was meant to turn me into a problem before I could become a truth. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lunge toward the door. I didn't give her the reaction she could label. I just looked at Harper, and then at Connor, and then back at my mother. "Call the security chief," I said. Harper's laugh came out again, sharp and satisfied. "Oh, I will," she said, fingers already tapping. Connor leaned forward as if he might snatch the phone, desperate to manage the optics. My mother whispered again, frantic now. "Don't let him do this." The glass doors behind Harper swung open from the inside before any of them finished moving. The sound was heavy and precise, and it pulled every eye in the immediate area toward the entrance. I heard the measured rhythm of footsteps on marble, the kind of stride that comes from training, not emotion. I didn't turn my head. I didn't need to. Marcus was coming. Marcus stepped into the doorway with the kind of calm that makes chaos feel small. He didn't look at Harper like she was in charge. He didn't look at my mother like she was the one to appease. He looked at the situation the way he looks at any situation that threatens the order of the building, as a problem to be defined, documented, and resolved. "Good evening," he said, voice even, eyes scanning quickly. "Is there an issue here?" Harper straightened like she'd been waiting for this moment, ready to play the role of the wronged host. "Yes," she said. "This man is trying to get in. He's not authorized for skyline level. We reserved the entire floor. Marcus's gaze shifted to me. He didn't ask my name. He already knew it. I could see it in the way his posture adjusted, the way his tone softened half a degree without losing authority. "Mr. Kincaid," he said, clear enough for the concierge and the guests nearby to hear. "Your table on Skyline level is ready. Chef Elena is waiting to review the tasting menu with you." The air changed. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, physical way, like someone turned down the volume on the room. Harper's mouth opened and didn't immediately find words. My mother's fingers tightened around the strap of her bag as if it was the only solid thing left in the world. Connor froze mid-step, his eyes flicking between Marcus and me, trying to calculate how far this had already traveled. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I simply took one step forward, and the glass doors that had been a barrier a second ago became what they actually were, an entrance. Inside the lobby, lights wrapped around everything in soft gold. The marble reflected silhouettes. The sound of conversation resumed in uneven bursts, like people weren't sure if they were allowed to keep living their own night. Tasha was behind the front desk, watching with that steady focus she always had. When I crossed the threshold, she met my eyes and gave a small nod that wasn't friendly or cold. It was professional. It was confirmation. "Good evening, Mr. Kincaid," she said, voice smooth. "Your father's executive suite is prepared and Skyline level is on schedule." "Thank you, Tasha," I replied, and then I turned back to my family, still stuck just outside the doors like they'd been assigned to the wrong side of reality. "Coming?" I asked. One word. Not an argument. Not a speech. A simple question that forced them to choose in front of the concierge, in front of the guests, checking in front of the people drifting toward the private elevator corridor. They could follow me or stand there and look like they were afraid to. Connor found his voice first, and it came out in the controlled tone he uses when he wants to sound like a mediator. "Okay," he said quickly, stepping inside as if that had been his plan all along. "This is obviously a misunderstanding. Let's just keep this private." My mother rushed to agree with him. "Yes," she said, leaning in close to me as we moved. "Blaze, please. Don't make this bigger than it needs to be. Your father's night. It got big when you tried to keep me out," I said quietly, not looking at her. Harper followed last, her heels clicking too sharply on the marble, her eyes darting to staff faces, checking for judgment. She was used to being the one people catered to. She wasn't used to being watched like she might be the problem. Marcus moved alongside us, slightly behind my shoulder in the way he always does when he's giving me space while still controlling the perimeter. The concierge's relief was visible. He finally knew which authority mattered. I noticed the camera above the doors, the small red indicator light, steady and indifferent. Everything that had just been said was now a fact, not a story. We headed toward the VIP elevator area. I didn't take the private back route. I wanted the lobby to see us pass through, wanted the building itself to witness the correction. My mother kept murmuring, trying to sew the night back together with words. "We didn't know," she said. "You never told us. You can't blame us for not—" "I'm not blaming you for not knowing," I said, still calm. "I'm blaming you for the way you treated me when you thought you did know." Connor tried to step closer to Marcus, lowering his voice as if he could negotiate the laws of optics. "Listen," he said, a little too friendly. "Maybe we can keep this from becoming a thing. You know how people talk." Marcus didn't respond the way Connor expected. He didn't smile back. He didn't reassure him. He simply said, "Sir, we follow policy." The word "sir" landed on Connor like an insult. In his mind, he was the one who deserved that respect. In Marcus's world, respect was assigned by role and behavior, not by ego. As we approached the elevator corridor, the doors to the main entrance slid open again behind us, and a small group came in, the kind of group that carries itself like it expects the room to adjust. One of the men in the lead was older, silver-haired, with a confidence that looked practiced. Another was younger, sharper, the kind of polished attorney look that turns casual into weapon. They saw me and slowed. "Mr. Kincaid," the older man said, and the way he said it made my mother's spine go stiff. "Keating. We've been trying to get 10 minutes on your calendar for months. My mother's face turned toward him so fast it was almost comical. Keating, she echoed like she was trying to place the name in the version of the world where she was still in control. Mr. Keating didn't even glance at her. His attention stayed on me. I had no idea you were connected to this event, he continued, voice warm with opportunity. If you have a moment tonight, I'd like to revisit our credit facility proposal. Connor's throat bobbed. He stepped half a pace forward, trying to attach himself to the conversation. Keating, he said too loud. Connor Hale. We've met. Keating's eyes flicked to Connor for a fraction of a second. Hale, he said, and the tone carried the faintest edge of recognition, not the kind Connor wanted. How's your bank holding up with that review? I heard there are still questions around your liquidity position. Connor's face changed just for a second, the mask slipping. It's fine, he said too quick. We're fine. Keating nodded as if he didn't believe him. Then his gaze returned to me and he smiled again like we were in the middle of a perfectly normal day. The message was clear even if he didn't intend it, as one Connor's status was not the status Connor sold at dinner tables. The younger man beside Keating leaned in slightly. Miles Sutter, he introduced himself, offering his hand with practiced ease. We've been hoping to speak with you about expanding our footprint. Your properties have become difficult to access. I imagine they have, I said, shaking his hand. I didn't need to look at my mother to feel her stomach drop. These were her important people. These were the names she'd been collecting like trophies. And here they were speaking to me like I was the center of the room because in the only language they truly respected, I was. Harper's lips parted as if she wanted to say something, maybe to claim connection, maybe to rewrite the moment. But she hesitated because she didn't know what version of herself would survive in this room anymore. We reached the elevator. I pulled the keycard out of my pocket and the reader flashed green immediately. No hesitation. No beep of refusal. The doors slid open like they'd been waiting for me all day. As we stepped in, Harper finally snapped out of her silence. I told them, she blurted, voice high. I told them not to let you up. I specifically said your name. The admission hung in the elevator like smoke. My mother's head whipped toward her. Harper, she hissed. Harper pressed on anyway, panicked now, trying to defend what couldn't be defended. Because you said he couldn't come, she said to my mother. You said not to let him in. Connor's eyes widened and he looked at me like he'd just realized we weren't arguing about feelings anymore. We were arguing about actions, logged actions, recorded words. A direct attempt to manipulate access inside a luxury tower. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The keycard in my hand was the answer. The elevator began to rise, smooth and silent. Through the glass panel, the lobby fell away below us, the people becoming smaller, the noise fading into a distant hum. Halfway up, Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced down, then back at me. Update, he said quietly. I watched his face as he read, and I felt my chest tighten in that calm, controlled way it does when I see a line being crossed. There's a man named Preston Weller. Marcus continued. He's requesting access to a restricted area. He claims he has authorization from the family. Harper's breath caught. My mother's fingers dug into her own palm. Connor looked like he wanted the elevator to stop so he could escape. I stared at the indicator above the doors as the numbers climbed, and I understood something with sudden clarity. They weren't going to accept the correction. They were going to fight for the story they wanted, even if it meant grabbing at power inside my building with both hands. Skyline level always felt different. The air was cooler up there, filtered and clean, and the lighting was designed to make people feel like they'd stepped into a place where ordinary rules didn't apply. Soft walls, thick carpet art chosen to look effortless. A quiet soundtrack that made you speak in lower tones without thinking. It was a level built for privacy, but privacy doesn't mean lawlessness. That was the part my family never understood. The elevator doors opened into the VIP lounge, and the first thing I noticed was how quickly faces tried to rearrange themselves. Staff recognized me immediately, their posture shifting into that respectful readiness I'd earned from them over years. Guests recognized my family too, and their eyes did what eyes always do in rooms like this. They measured, they categorized. They decided who mattered. My mother moved fast as if speed could fix what had already been seen. She stepped close to me, her voice dropping to a plea that tried to sound maternal. "Blaze," she said, "please. Not here. Your father's friends, people in this room if they hear. You don't understand what this could do to us. To us. Not to him. Not to the birthday. Not to family. To the image she'd carried like a shield." Harper stood behind her with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, the kind of smile people wear when their world is tilting and they're trying to act like it's still upright. "We're proud of you," she said too quickly. "We always have been. This is amazing. We just didn't know." Connor drifted toward Marcus as if they were equals, as if he could whisper a deal into existence. He lowered his voice. "Listen," he said, and I caught the tone, that familiar mix of charm and pressure. "Maybe we can keep this contained. You know how these places operate. There's discretion." Marcus didn't nod. He didn't lean in. He stayed professional, his gaze steady. "We document incidents," he said. "That's our discretion." Connor's smile tightened, then faded. I watched all of them for a beat, absorbing the pattern. My mother trying to shrink the truth into a private inconvenience. Harper trying to paste a new storyline over the old one without admitting she'd been the blade at the door. Connor trying to negotiate with staff like the tower was a lounge he could talk his way through. The desperation was almost impressive. Almost. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, not loud but clear. They all went still. Even my mother. "We are not arguing in the lobby," I continued, keeping my voice level. "We are not creating a scene for staff and guests. But we are also not pretending what happened didn't happen." My mother's eyes flashed. "Blaze, I'm not finished," I said, and the firmness surprised even me. Not because I hadn't felt it before, but because I'd never used it on her. I turned slightly to Marcus. "I want an incident log," I said. "Who blocked the entrance? Who instructed staff to deny access? The exact language used, the timestamps, the camera references, any attempt to access restricted areas. Everything." My mother inhaled sharply like she'd been slapped. "Are you serious?" she whispered. "It's your family." "It's my building," I replied, still calm. "And my staff. No one gets to use them as tools." Harper stepped forward, voice softening into that familiar manipulative sweetness. "Blaze," she said, "you're overreacting. We were just trying to keep the night classy. You know how Dad gets. You know how Mom worries. You don't have to punish us." I looked at her. "Punish you would be yelling," I said. "Punish you would be throwing you out. I'm not doing that. I'm setting a boundary." Connor tried a different angle, the one my family always used when they wanted to put me back under control. "If you do this," he said, voice low, "you're going to affect the family's reputation. You're going to hurt your father. People will talk. You'll look vindictive." Vindictive. The word was almost funny coming from a man who'd stood there while my sister laughed at me like I was dirt on the curb. Before I could respond, a staff member approached Marcus and spoke quietly into his ear. Marcus's expression didn't change, but his eyes sharpened as he listened. Then he looked at me. "He's here," Marcus said. Preston Weller appeared at the end of the corridor like he'd been waiting for his cue. He had that polished confidence that plays well in photographs, hair-perfect suit, expensive smile, ready. He walked toward us with his hands open in a gesture meant to disarm, as if he was doing everyone a favor by showing up. "Blaze," he said, like we were friends. "Good to see you. Listen, I think there's been a misunderstanding downstairs. I'm just trying to make sure everything goes smoothly. There are some people here tonight who could really help our family, and we don't want any unnecessary tension." Our family. The nerve of it landed like heat behind my eyes, but I kept my face neutral. "Marcus tells me you're requesting access to a restricted area," I said. On what authority? Preston reached into his jacket and produced a piece of paper like it was a magic trick. "I have authorization," he said, tapping it lightly. "From the family." My mother's eyes flicked to the paper, and I saw the briefest surge of hope on her face, as if Preston had brought a loophole she could hide in. Harper stood a little straighter. Connor looked relieved the way weak men look relieved when someone else takes the risk. I didn't take the paper. From which person, I asked, and for what scope? Preston chuckled as if I was being unnecessarily formal. Come on, he said. It's just access for a few minutes. I need to speak with Mr. Keating and Miles Sutter privately. It's a perfect night to finalize some things. Everyone's here. It would be foolish to waste the opportunity. My stomach settled again. There it was. The real reason. The birthday was a cover, and Preston was treating my tower like a backdrop for a deal. Marcus extended his hand. May I see that document, he said. Preston handed it over with the confidence of someone who thought format didn't matter as long as the signature looked convincing. Marcus scanned it once, then again slower. This isn't an opaline authorization, Marcus said. His tone stayed flat, almost bored. There's no internal reference number. The formatting is incorrect. The signature block doesn't match our standards. Preston's smile twitched. It's just a letter, he said quickly. It doesn't need all that. It's from the family. Family doesn't override security protocol, Marcus replied. A couple of guests nearby slowed, pretending not to listen. One of them, a woman with the kind of jewelry that announces old money without trying, tilted her head toward Harper. The room's attention began to pivot, subtle but undeniable. Harper jumped in too fast. He's with us, she said. Preston is with us. He needs to handle something. We promised what I asked, and my voice was still calm, but it cut through her sentence like a blade. Harper's cheeks flushed. She glanced toward the corridor that led into the main dining space where the party was happening, where the Whitmores and Keating and Sutter were gathering around glasses and laughter. She was thinking about what she'd said to them earlier, what she'd hinted, what she'd sold. One of the guests, a man with a quiet, authoritative air, turned toward us. Harper, he said, voice polite and sharp. You mentioned earlier that you could help expedite that resort membership. Was that not accurate? Harper's mouth opened, then closed. My mother's eyes widened in panic. I felt the ground shift under their story. Harper had promised something she didn't have. Preston had walked in expecting the tower to bend because he was marrying into a last name. Connor had been puffing up his bank title while Keating casually exposed how fragile that bank actually was. My mother had been trying to narrate me as unstable while every person with real power in the building was looking at me like the only stable thing in the room. Connor's voice rose sharp with fear. This is insane, he hissed at me. You're going to ruin everything. I'm not ruining anything, I said. I'm stopping you from using my building to lie. My mother reached for my arm nails, pressing lightly into my sleeve. Blaze, she pleaded, please. We can talk later. Just let tonight go. Let it be a dinner. It stopped being just dinner when you tried to lock me out, I said, and I gently removed her hand from my sleeve without aggression. Here's your way out. Stop. Right now. No more orders to staff. No more false notes. No more paper waved like a pass. You sit down, you celebrate Dad, and you let the building operate the way it's supposed to. Preston's confidence cracked and turned defensive. You're being dramatic, he snapped, dropping the friendly tone. You're making this personal. It is personal when you forge your way into restricted spaces, Marcus said, still flat. And that was the moment Preston realized the tower wasn't a room he could charm. It was a system. I didn't expose everything I knew. I didn't mention the email yet, the one stored with metadata and timestamps. I didn't mention the lease file or the membership request or the bank review in detail. I didn't have to. The threat of consequences was already visible in their eyes, because they could feel how much of their lives depended on things they didn't control. Marcus's phone buzzed again. He glanced down, then looked at me, expression steady. Update from operations, he said quietly. The lease request and the bank review are both nearing decision points. I felt the choice settle into my hands like weight. I could close the door on them right now in the same building where they tried to close the door on me. I could let the system deliver consequences instantly and watch them collapse in public. Or I could hold it, wait for the moment when the truth would land where it mattered most, in front of my father, in the room they'd built to prove their worth. I looked past them toward the dining room entrance. I could hear faint laughter, the clink of glasses, my father's booming voice in the distance, unaware that his birthday had become a battlefield. And I decided I wasn't going to waste the perfect moment. I walked from the Skyline Lounge into the dining room without announcing myself, and the room shifted anyway. Staff straightened as if a current ran through them, and more than one person said my name, like it was routine, like I belonged here because I did. The lighting was soft, the tables set with careful symmetry, and my father's laughter carried over the clink of glasses, big, familiar, unaware of the storm waiting just outside his line of sight. Then he saw me. He stood up too fast, chair legs scraping. "What are you doing here?" he demanded, loud enough for heads to turn. "Your mother said you couldn't make it." That single sentence opened a crack in everything my mother had tried to cement. If I couldn't make it, why did staff look to me? Why did the security chief fall into step beside me? Why did the room feel like it was resetting around my presence? Before my mother could rush in and patch the story, Mr. Keating spotted me and moved first. "Mr. Kincaid," he said, extending a hand like we were resuming an unfinished conversation. "I've been trying to get 10 minutes with you for months." Miles Sutter followed with a polished smile. "Same here. We'd love to speak about expanding our lease." I answered politely, briefly. A nod, a handshake, a few controlled words. I didn't need to explain myself. Their recognition did it for me. My mother's face tightened into that careful expression she wears when the room stops obeying her. She pulled me toward the side near the bar where the light was dimmer and the noise could hide whispers. "Blaze," she pleaded, voice low and urgent. "Not tonight, not in front of everyone. This is your father's birthday." Harper stood close, smiling too hard. "This is incredible," she said, forcing warmth into her voice. "We're proud of you. We always have been." Connor edged in like a negotiator. "Let's just handle this later," he said. "No need to turn it into a whole situation." I looked at all three of them, then back at the room they'd assembled to prove something. "I'm not here to argue," I said. "I'm here to end what started at the front door." I turned slightly to Marcus. "I want confirmation," I said loud enough for the people nearest us to hear without making it a spectacle. In front of a witness. Tasha had already stepped into the periphery, professional and steady. Marcus's voice stayed calm, procedural. "At the entrance, Ms. Harper attempted to deny you access," he said. "There was also an attempt to place a restriction note in the event file regarding your name. Additionally, Mr. Preston Weller attempted to access a restricted area using an authorization document that did not meet Opaline standards." Preston, who'd been hovering like he owned the air, tried to jump in with a grin. "Come on," he said, pitching his voice toward the nearest VIPs. "I was just trying to make sure things ran smoothly. There are opportunities tonight." I cut him off with the only question that mattered. "Whose authorization and what scope?" I asked. Marcus didn't elaborate, didn't dramatize. The document had no internal reference number, incorrect format, and no valid authorization for restricted access, he said. "Attempting entry is a violation." Preston's smile faltered. The room around him cooled by a few degrees, the way it does when people sense someone's been bluffing. Across the table line, a Whitmore representative turned toward Harper with polite sharpness. "You mentioned earlier you could expedite a membership," he said. "Was that accurate?" Harper blinked, caught between pride and panic. It's a small thing," she stammered, and the stammer said more than any confession. She'd been selling access she didn't own. Connor tried to regain footing by leaning into Mr. Keating. "We can discuss the bank side later," he said quickly, voice tight. Keating's eyebrows lifted. "The review is already at a decision stage," he said casually, and Connor's face drained. The title Connor wore like armor suddenly looked like paint. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand apologies. I simply faced my father and the guests who mattered to my mother's story. "I won't turn this into family theater," I said, "but I will not allow anyone to misuse my staff, manipulate access, or waive fake authority inside this building." Dinner continues. Standards stay. Violations get handled by policy. Then I stepped closer to my father, held out the plain envelope, and let it speak before I did. "Happy birthday," I said. That's the deed to a Santa Barbara coastal home. From the son you were told couldn't afford to walk through the front doors. His hands took it slowly, like the paper weighed more than it should. His eyes searched mine, and for the first time all night he looked confused, in a way that wasn't anger, it was realization. I glanced back at my mother, Harper, and Connor. "I'm staying," I said simply. "I'm done being written out of rooms I built." The party tried to breathe again. Glasses clinked. People laughed too loudly, as if volume could patch what had been exposed. Tasha came close enough to speak without being overheard. "Operations update," she murmured. "Harper's lease file just changed status. And there's a new note on Connor's bank review." I held my expression steady, but inside the choice sharpened. I could let the consequences fall right here in the room my mother curated. Or I could wait until I was alone with my father and finish this with respect instead of spectacle. I stepped away from the center of the room before anyone could pull me back into performance. I nodded once to Marcus. "Keep the level secure, keep staff protected, keep the event running clean," and then I walked toward the terrace doors where the city spread out like a field of lights. My father followed a minute later, slower now, the envelope still in his hands. The terrace air was cooler, the noise behind us muted into a distant hum. For the first time all night it felt like we were standing somewhere real. "How long?" he asked, not looking at the skyline, looking at me. "How long have you been this?" "A long time," I said. "Long enough that I stopped waiting for you to believe me." His jaw tightened. "Why didn't you tell us?" I exhaled through my nose, not amused, not angry, just tired. "I tried, Dad. 10 years ago. I asked for respect. Not money, not praise. Respect. You called what I chose beneath. Mom treated it like a stain. So I built quietly. Because I learned the hard way that you only listened when success came with a price tag." He flinched, as if the words hit a place he didn't want touched. "Tonight wasn't supposed to be like this," he muttered. "No," I said. "Tonight was supposed to be a show. And they didn't want me on stage because I didn't fit the role they assigned me. I didn't tell him to pick a side. I didn't beg him to defend me. I just let the truth settle between us the way heavy things do when you finally set them down." After a moment I went back inside, not to the party but to the executive office on the level where the building's decisions lived. Tasha was there with her tablet, Marcus nearby. "No drama, just work." "The lease file?" I asked. "Move to hold," Tasha said. "Doesn't meet qualifications, and the incident note triggers an ethics review regarding improper directives to staff." "And the bank review escalated," she replied. "Stricter diligence path due to conflict behavior and pressure attempts observed tonight. Standard procedure once documented." I nodded once. "Everything by policy," I said. "No exceptions." When I returned to the corridor, I caught my mother near the exit of the dining room, speaking to someone with that practiced warmth. "I've always supported Blaze," she was saying, voice full of pride she hadn't shown an hour earlier. Then she saw me, and her expression shifted, calculating. She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "Say something nice about Harper," she whispered. "Just one sentence. Help her save face." I looked at her for a long beat. "No," I said quietly. "I won't lie to protect the story you prefer." Down the hall, Preston was being escorted away from the restricted area by Marcus's team, not roughly, just firmly. He tried to argue at first, then stopped when he realized no one was impressed. The people he'd wanted to charm had already seen what he was willing to fake to get close. I didn't chase him. I didn't need to. Consequences had a way of traveling faster than anger. Near the end of the night, I spoke to my father again briefly. "The gift stands," I told him. "So does the door between us if we can speak with respect." Then I looked at my mother and Harper. "If you want anything connected to Opaline," I said, "you go through official channels. No favors. No whispered requests. No using my staff like they're props." Connor tried to meet my eyes, trying to read whether I was threatening him. I didn't. "Financial relationships follow rules," I told him. "You made your choices tonight." When the last guests began to leave and the lobby thinned, I walked down one final time and stopped near the glass doors. The same entrance Harper had blocked. The same threshold my mother had tried to turn into a wall. It looked normal now, quiet, polished, indifferent. But I could still feel the moment on my skin. Family blindness doesn't just hurt your feelings. It rewrites your worth until you start questioning your own reflection. And when the truth finally shows up, it doesn't need to scream. It just needs to stand there long enough for everyone to see it. I turned away from the doors and went back up, not waiting for permission, not looking for approval. My place had never been at their table. It was in everything I built when they decided I wasn't worth seeing. I didn't walk away from that night feeling victorious. There was no rush, no sense of triumph, no satisfaction in watching people stumble over the truth. What I felt was quieter and heavier than that. It was the weight of finally standing in a place I had earned and realizing how long it took to stop asking for permission to exist there. For years, I thought the hardest part was building something real without support. I was wrong. The hardest part was accepting that some people only know how to love you when your success flatters them, and that includes the people who share your last name. That night forced me to see my family clearly, not as villains, not as monsters, but as people who chose comfort over curiosity, image over understanding. They weren't blind because they couldn't see. They were blind because seeing me as I truly was would have required them to admit they were wrong. And for some people, being wrong feels more dangerous than losing someone they claim to love. I stopped waiting for them to change. I stopped shrinking myself to fit into a story that never had room for my truth. If you're listening to this and something in it hurts in a familiar way, I want you to hear this clearly. Being dismissed does not mean you are small. Being underestimated does not mean you lack value. Sometimes it simply means the people around you are measuring life with the wrong tools. Your worth was never supposed to be voted on at a dinner table or validated by someone else's comfort. It lives in the work you do when no one is clapping, in the standards you hold, when no one is watching, in the quiet discipline it takes to keep going after you've been told directly or indirectly that you don't belong. I know what it's like to stay silent for years just to keep the peace. I know what it's like to let people believe a version of you that's easier for them to digest. And I know how terrifying it feels to finally step into the light and risk being misunderstood all over again. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. Silence doesn't protect you. It just delays the moment when reality shows up anyway. And when it does, it shows up on its own terms. I didn't tell this story to shame anyone. I told it because too many people are walking around carrying invisible wounds caused by the very people who should have been their first supporters. I told it because family blindness is rarely loud. It's quiet, polite, wrapped in concern and tradition and expectations. And because of that, it's easy to internalize. Easy to believe maybe you really are the problem. You're not. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been made to feel like your dreams were too small, too strange, or too embarrassing for the people closest to you, I want you to know you're not alone. And before you move on, I'd love to know you were here with me. Leave a comment. Say hi, say listening, or tell me where you're watching from. Sometimes the simple act of being seen by one another is how healing starts. If you haven't already, consider subscribing. Not because I'm chasing numbers, but because stories like this don't get told unless someone is willing to listen. Subscribing means you're choosing honesty over polished substance over noise. It helps this space remain a place where real experiences aren't buried under pretending everything is fine. Thank you for staying until the end. Thank you for listening without judgment. And most of all, thank you for giving your time to a story that wasn't easy to tell. Wherever you are right now, whatever you're building quietly while others doubt you, keep going. One day you won't need to explain yourself. You'll simply walk through the door.